8 days. That's all it took. Permit to license. A CDL school in New Jersey posted this story on their own website with outward glowing pride. And here's the part that should really raise some eyebrows. Every single thing about that story was completely legal. In the eyes of the law, the school did nothing wrong. The driver did nothing wrong. The state of New Jersey did nothing wrong. The federal government looked at that situation and decided it was good enough. In this case, 8 days was good enough to put someone behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound vehicle on the same highways that your family drives on every single day. I have been in this industry for over 30 plus years, and I'm here to tell you, 8 days is not good enough. Not even close. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. The federal agency responsible for commercial truck safety in this country, the FMCSA, had the legal authority to require a minimum number of training hours before someone could get a commercial driver's license. They chose not to exercise that authority. Their own documentation says it all, and I'm quoting right here. There is no minimum number of hours required for either behind-the-wheel training or knowledge training. No minimum. Zero, zilch, nada. By federal law, a CDL school can certify a student as proficient after 8 hours of training behind the wheel, or even after 5 hours, or even after only 3 hours, as long as an instructor checks that tiny little box that says the student demonstrated proficiency. The federal government has no mechanism to verify whether that was a true statement or not. There are approximately 2,100 CDL schools in this country that have actually been vetted and licensed by a state authority. 2,100. The Federal Training Provider Registry, which is the list that the FMCSA uses to track approved CDL training programs, lists approximately 35,000 providers. Obviously, nobody got the memo to check out the other 32,900 unvetted schools. Nobody. And to think that since 2009, large truck involvement and fatal crashes have actually increased by a whopping 49%. This video is about what happened and what steps we need to take to fix this problem. The rule that was supposed to fix CDL training in America was known by the acronym ELDT, which stands for the Entry-Level Driver Training Rule. Congress first mandated it back in 2012. However, it took a decade to implement it, and it finally took effect February 7th of 2022. And the trucking industry has been waiting for it, because for the first time, the federal government was able to standardize what it actually meant to train a commercial driver in America. Except, didn't work out that way. What the ELDT program actually requires is for a first-time CDL applicant complete theory and behind-the-wheel training through a registered provider and demonstrate proficiency before sitting down to take a skills test. What it explicitly does not require is any minimum number of training hours, not for classroom instruction, not for behind-the-wheel time, not for any total training time at all. The Entry-Level Driver Training Advisory Committee recommended a minimum of 30 hours behind-the-wheel training for Class A programs. 30 hours. That is less than a single work week. The FMCSA declined. They had the authority, they had the recommendation, they had a decade to think about it, and they still said no. And then they built the Training Provider Registry. That's the federal list of approved CDL schools, but they did so on a self-certification model, meaning that any school that wants to appear on that registry simply has to self-certify that it meets the necessary requirements, and we're supposed to take their word for it. Isn't that kind of like the fox guarding the chicken house, wouldn't you say? The FMCSA does not require proof of state license before a school appears on that list, and there are no mandatory on-site inspections. You simply fill out a form and you're on the list. You are now a federally recognized CDL training provider. Yeah, baby. Another scam is born. Steve Gold, the founder of 160 Driving Academy, one of the largest commercial driver training networks in the country, with approximately 140 locations across 43 states, put it plainly in a December 2025 interview. He said the FMCSA does not follow up and has no enforcement capabilities, and that anybody and their brother can put themselves on the registry as a licensed entity, and the federal government has no clue. Only 2,100 CDL schools have actually been vetted and licensed by a state authority. Yet there are a total of 35,000 schools listed on the federal registry. What about the other 32,900 schools that nobody bothered to vet or check out? Now, here's where this goes from this being a policy failure to something that belongs in a completely different category of seriousness. The problems in CDL testing are not new. In 2002, the Department of Transportation's own Inspector General issued a report documenting widespread fraud in third-party CDL testing that goes all the way back to at least 1998. Suspected fraud was identified in 16 states within a 4-year span. The Inspector General used a covert undercover audit to show exactly how bad it was. An Arkansas state trooper went undercover and took the CDL skills test at 3 different state testing sites. He passed and got a CDL at all 3 locations. But get this, at one of the 3 locations, the test consisted primarily of a simple conversation with the examiner about his time in the Army. He never drove the truck, never did a skills test, but still passed and got a CDL. And he's not the only one. A 2008 report to Congress documented that the FMCSA had identified more than 15,000 individuals suspected of obtaining their CDLs fraudulently during a 3-year investigation period. 15,000. And investigators believed that number represented only a fraction of what was actually happening. Fast forward to one of the biggest scandals. Investigators documented what a fully corrupted version of the system looks like in practice at a school called Skyline CDL. Cash envelopes, approximately $520 in some, $530 in others, stuffed in envelopes, mailed to a Washington State examiner in exchange for CDL passing scores. Investigators found that some of the drivers had not even taken the test at all. When the state conducted retesting, 80% of their Skyline drivers failed. Over 100 commercial licenses were revoked, and buried in the additional violations, schools deliberately bypassed the English language proficiency requirements altogether. Federal regulations require commercial drivers to read and understand highway safety signs in English and to understand and be able to respond to official inquiries. This law has been in effect since 1937. I want you to think about what that actually means when you put a driver out on the open highway who cannot read signs above roadways that they're driving on. Signs that warn of an accident ahead or stop traffic or construction ahead. This is one of the biggest contributors to what leads to rear-end crashes and big pileups. I've been in this trucking industry for over 30 years. I have seen what happens when things go wrong at highway speeds. A driver who cannot read a warning sign is not just a danger to themselves. They're a danger to every single vehicle and every single soul out there on the road driving around them. I want to address everyone watching this who does not drive a truck, does not work in the trucking industry, because this story is not just for truckers. Every time you merge onto a highway, every time you pass a big rig on the interstate, every time your family takes a road trip, you're sharing that road with a commercial truck driver. You have the right to know how those drivers are trained, You have a right to know that the federal government had your back, that they had the authority to require minimum training standards and chose not to do so. You have the right to be angry about it. I know I am. The 49% increase in large truck fatal crashes since 2009 is mind-boggling. Those are real people, real families, real funerals. If this story is making you angry, and it should, hit that subscribe button right now. Stories that affect every driver on every highway in this country. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone you know that shares the road with a commercial truck, which is everybody. Now let's finish this. In late 2025, Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy addressed this problem publicly. He announced that the department was prepared to use financial penalties, federal investigations, and if necessary, revoke states' authorities to issue CDLs in cases of systematic fraud. He specifically asked who was doing the testing of these drivers, who was verifying that candidates could speak English and demonstrate basic competency. Those are the right questions. However, we are still waiting on the answers. Here's what the fix actually looks like, and this is important. It does not require new legislation. It does not require an act of Congress. Steve Gold's proposed solution makes sense. All you have to do is require proof of state license. That single administrative change would reduce the registry from 35,000 entries to approximately 2,100 overnight. It would close the loophole, and only the schools that have actually been vetted by a state authority would be eligible. The schools that have actually been inspected, the schools that have actually demonstrated that they meet the minimum requirements. The FMCSA can do it right now, today, without asking anyone's permission, without waiting for Congress, without a new rulemaking progress. They have the authority, they have the recommendation, they have the data, yet they haven't done it. Why? That's the question. Why? Meanwhile, the Hawaii to New Jersey pipeline continues. It's legal. It's documented on CDL school websites, has a perk feature. And somewhere in this country, this week, another driver is boarding a plane to a state with faster testing and fewer, more lax requirements for obtaining a CDL that authorizes them to operate some of the largest vehicles on American roads. I want to leave you with one question. The next time an 80,000-pound truck passes you on the highway, ask yourself how long that driver may have trained before they got behind the wheel of that big truck. Because right now, there is no federal law that guarantees the answer is anything more than a matter of days. For this driver from Hawaii, it only took a matter of 8 days, start to finish, including travel time to and from that CDL school. To be legally licensed to operate a vehicle that weighs nearly 40 times what your car weighs, 8 days to learn how to stop an 80,000-pound missile at highway speed, 8 days to learn how to handle a loaded trailer on a wet highway at night and on a grade, 8 days. This channel exists because this kind of stuff deserves to be told. Share this video, put it in front of every driver, every fleet manager, every safety director, every parent who puts their kids in a car on an American highway. Because the only thing that changes this, the only thing that ever changes any of this, is when enough people refuse to look away. I'm Jim Campbell. Drive safe out there.